The Hong Kong triads have their roots deep within Chinese history, with their legacy stretching back to the 17th century. The crime gang has its fingers in almost every pie, whether it be social, political, or the economy. Their influence looms over all walks of life, having left a greater impact on Chinese history in comparison to their British colonizers. Initially founded as a nationalist patriotic society, they vowed to drive the Manchu invaders from China in the 1600s. They also played a pinnacle part in allowing Chinese Presidents Sun Yat-sen and Chiang Kai-shek to rise to power, indicating both their influence and importance in Chinese history. Triads are structured with the help of numeric codes that help to determine position and rank within the gang. These numbers are influenced by Chinese numerology, which gives them greater significance within the culture. The head of a triad, or the mountain dragon master head, is 489. This is followed by the deputy mountain master with 438. Straw Sandal, or the stand-in for the mountain master, is recognized as 432. Under these high-ranking individuals come the incense master and the vanguard, who is known as 438 or 2238, and are in charge of all initiation ceremonies. Rumor has it that the vanguard's word is law, an indication of how everything is not as it seems, especially within a triad. Now, all of this seems super complicated, and it gets worse when we look at their initiation ceremonies. These ceremonies usually take place at an altar decorated with incense and an animal sacrifice. In order to become a part of the triad, the candidate must drink a mix of wine and blood. The blood can come from either the animal or the candidate themselves. Talk about creepy and disturbing. We wouldn't want to drink blood even if there was a gun to our head. This isn't Twilight. After this, they walk beneath an arch of swords while reciting the triad's oaths. Once this is done, the initiate must burn the paper upon which the oaths were written as a sign of their obligation to the triad. To show how serious they are in joining the triad, one of the oaths that the candidate must agree to says, "I shall never betray my sworn brothers. If, through an understanding, I have caused the arrest of one of my brothers, I must release him immediately. If I break this oath, I will be killed by 5 thunderbolts." Now, another question on our minds is, how do triads seek members? According to ex-triad members, the process is pretty much the same as it is within extremist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Lower-level members draw in disenfranchised young men with the promise of family and belonging. That means socially awkward and bullied boys who come from broken, low-income homes are prime candidates. Young men who fit into these categories are lulled into trusting triad members with drugs, alcohol, the promise of street cred, and the idea that if they help the triad will have their backs. Once these kids are hooked on the promise of brotherhood and coolness, there's no going back. The triad has them in its grasp. Another tactic employed by triad members is to go to schools and settle petty playground arguments, like one who stole the other person's girlfriend or random bullying. Violence was always the answer in these situations, and it always spoke the loudest. This cycle of terror was deeply ingrained into the triad as well, with young members being assaulted if they broke the rules. Little did the recruits know, they were trading high school bullies for another set of more violent and dangerous ones. Let's take a look at some of the most influential triad members of our time, seeing how their humble beginnings brought them face to face with a life led by violence, crime, and murder. Wan Kuok-koi is a gangster and former leader of the Macau wing of the 14K triad. He has spent more than a decade in prison and was released in December 2012. However, soon after his release, he re-embraced his life of crime and took part in illegal gambling rings in Myanmar and the drug trade with cartels situated in and around the Golden Triangle. Wan had a hard and difficult upbringing in the slums of Macau, where he fought ruthlessly to live on the streets until he rose through the ranks of the 14K. This change was brought on by the presence of another gangster, Ying Wai, whom he worked for. As Wan continued to gain power, he was asked by Wai to assassinate the top boss, Mo Ding Ping, something Wan agreed to do. This led to a brutal and violent turf war, with Wan and Wai emerging victorious, and Ping fleeing Macau to avoid arrest. However, things slowly became tense between the two gangsters, especially because of Wan's celebrity status in Macau. So in 1996 and 1997, there was another turf war, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. In 1997, an unsigned letter was sent to leading newspapers. It said that Broken Tooth Koi could no longer be mentioned in the press, or else bullets will have no eyes, and knives and bullets will have no feelings, signaling the start of a potential bloodbath. Wan wasn't about to give up. He began to attack Wai by calling him a drug trafficker and declaring that anyone who visited Wai's casinos would be cut off. Eventually, Wan gained enough power and influence and was able to capture Wai's racket. At this point, he was earning $6 million a month from his gambling establishments. But all good and illegal things must come to an end. In November 1999, Wai was convicted of illegal gambling, loan sharking, and criminal association. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. In December 2012, he was released and promptly returned to the casino junket business. Wan remains active to this day. Bak Gwai John, or White Devil John, is an American mobster associated with the Chinese Mafia in Boston and New York. He is the only white person who operates within the Chinese organized crime syndicate. As a child, Willis was raised in a single-parent home by his mother until her death when he was 14. His father had abandoned him when he was 2, and so Willis was left to fend for himself. Working as a bouncer in a bar linked with Chinese criminals, Willis intervened in a physical fight on behalf of a Chinese gangster called Vapeng John Zhou. In return, Vapeng gave Willis a number that he told him to call if he ever needed anything. This favor would come in handy soon when Willis found himself broke and homeless. He was taken into the Ping On Gang, a Chinese crime ring with links to the 14K Triad. Soon, he was sent to New York to act as a bodyguard for a Chinese gangster in the city. While Willis was in New York, he began to pick up some Cantonese and Toisanese in an attempt to flirt with women. He eventually became fluent, and this skill was essential to his rise in the Chinese crime hierarchy. In the 1990s, Willis returned to Boston to work for a gangster called Bai Ming. A Chinese turf war broke out, and Ming was left the last man standing, and the most important gangster in Boston's Chinatown. Willis, as his second in command, became equally influential. However, Willis's dance with power soon came to an end, and he was arrested in 2000 for extortion.